Hello, this is the Death Row and Executions channel. I am Paco Rivera. You can also follow me on Facebook for more death row news and updates. There will be a link for my Facebook in the description below. Also, check out my other channel, The Maximum Sentence, where I cover recent crimes and convictions. There will also be a link for that. Just a few days ago, on Wednesday, December the 3rd, the state of Georgia announced an execution date for death row inmate Stacey Ian Humphreys to take place on December 17th. So Humphreys learned on the 3rd of December that he will be executed in 14 days. There are 34 inmates on death row in the state of Georgia, 33 men and 1 woman, a woman named Tiffany Moss, who was the stepmother of Emily Moss and was sentenced to death for the 2013 murder of her stepdaughter by allowing Imani to starve to death. There is no scheduled execution for Tiffany Moss at this time. This is set to be the first and only execution in Georgia this year. The last execution to take place there was that of Willie Pye, who was executed in March of last year, 2024. Stacey Humphreys was convicted and sentenced to death for the 2003 murders of 2 real estate agents, Lori Brown, who was 21 years old, and Cynthia Williams, who was 33. They were killed in the sales office of a model home at the Oakwind subdivision in Powder Springs, Georgia, where the 2 women were working, selling newly built homes in that community. Oakwind subdivision is a community of homes that in the year 2003 had homes up for sale. On November the 3rd of that year, at about 1:45 in the afternoon, one of the men working construction in that subdivision had entered the model home that was being shown to potential clients, potential home buyers. He walked into the sales office and was shocked to find one of the 2 women working in that office dead and bloody on the floor. And he notified police, whom after arriving and upon further investigation found the second woman dead in that office. As it turns out, several witnesses had seen a man driving away from the model home shortly before the discovery. A large man driving a black Dodge Durango. That information was released to the media, and a man would later call authorities, and he told them that description of the man in the vehicle sounds a lot like his co-worker, a man named Stacey Humphreys. And the caller also said that Humphreys did not show up for work on November the 3rd, the day the 2 women were killed. Stacey Humphreys, who was born in 1973, was 30 years old in 2003. He was a convicted felon who had served time in prison for multiple crimes that included burglary and being in possession of a gun when he wasn't allowed to have one, and several other crimes. By November of 2003, he had been released on parole and was regularly meeting with his parole officer. He also had a job. Investigators followed up on the tip and wanted to look further into Stacey Humphreys, but instead of approaching him directly to question him, they made a decision to do surveillance on him, to observe his activities, and there were detectives assigned to watch Humphreys, who was living at his grandmother's house, which was located in Dunwoody, Georgia, about 26 miles or a 40-minute drive from Powder Springs, where the 2 real estate agents were killed. Going back to the day of the murders, we would later learn that Stacey Humphreys had entered the model home in Powder Springs about 12:40 that afternoon on November the 3rd. He went to the sales office and encountered 33-year-old Cynthia Williams, known more as Cindy. Humphreys, who was armed with a stolen handgun, pointed the gun at Cindy and forced her to remove all her clothing. He then took Cindy's ATM and credit cards, and he forced her to call her bank so that he can know the balance of how much money she had. He also forced Cindy to reveal the PIN numbers for her ATM cards. Humphreys then used Cindy's undergarment to strangle her, but that didn't work. So he forced her to move over to another area of the office and go behind a desk that actually belonged to Cindy's partner, 21-year-old Lori Brown. Once behind the desk, he used his gun to fire a shot that went into her back, going through her lung and heart. He then fired a second shot into her head and left her dead, face down under the desk. Moments later, Lori Brown arrived at the model home and was immediately confronted by Humphreys. Following a short struggle in which Humphreys had choked Lori with a headlock, he proceeded to repeat almost exactly everything that had occurred with Cindy. He forced Lori to remove all her clothing. He took her ATM and credit cards. He forced her to disclose her ATM card PIN numbers. He made her call her bank to hear for himself how much money she had on those cards. He then shot her once in the back of the head, killing her, and fled the scene about 1:30 that afternoon. So about 50 minutes after he arrived at that model home. And the bodies would be discovered just a short time later. By the way, in case anyone is wondering, even though Humphreys had forced both women to remove all their clothing, there is nothing in any of the case files mentioning that an indecent assault had taken place, or there was no evidence of it, so he was never charged with that. Several days later, after investigators had received the tip about Stacey Humphreys and they were keeping a close eye on him while the investigation was continuing, they learned that Humphreys was on parole. Detectives made arrangements for Humphreys to appear for a parole meeting with his parole officer on the morning of November the 7th. Well, that call might have spooked Humphreys because that morning of the 7th, back at Stacey Humphreys' grandmother's house, a detective was watching from a distance and saw him loading his black Durango with all kinds of luggage and boxes of stuff. That detective was also actually in contact with Humphreys' parole officer, and the detective told the parole officer, "Hey, it doesn't look to me like he's going to your meeting. Looks more like he's about to take off." So authorities did make the decision at that time to take Humphreys into custody for questioning. But as officers approached the house, they learned that he had fled through a back door and ran across several backyards of other homes in the neighborhood. One woman stated to police that she saw Humphreys running through her yard and he had a hand in his pocket like he was holding onto something, trying to keep it from falling out of his pocket. The theory was that he was carrying a gun, possibly the same murder weapon that killed the two real estate agents, which turned out to be correct because when he was captured, he still had it on him. It also appears that even though he decided to abandon his black Durango and all his personal stuff that he had loaded into the Durango, he did keep with him the victim's ATM and credit cards because he soon made his way to a budget rent-a-car and he rented a silver Grand Cherokee using one of those stolen credit cards. By this time, authorities had learned of multiple transactions totaling almost $3,000 that Humphreys had made using the stolen cards. And there was no longer any question in their minds that he is in fact the killer of Cindy Williams and Lori Brown. And a bolo, a be on the lookout, went out across the nation. And as luck would have it, on the following day, on November the 8th, the day after he fled from his grandmother's home in Dunwoody, Georgia, a state trooper on patrol near Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a distance of about 830 miles away from Dunwoody. That state trooper had pulled his patrol unit off to the side of the road to have breakfast, and on his monitor, while having breakfast in his vehicle, he saw the bolo out of Georgia about the double murder, and then looked up and spotted a silver Jeep Grand Cherokee with a budget rent-a-car banner on the vehicle going past him. And the chase was on. A chase that involved multiple other law enforcement units. Stop sticks were used that blew out all the tires, but that didn't stop Humphreys. He kept on going. He was intent on getting away, but it was of no use. He had nowhere to go and was captured and arrested. As I mentioned earlier, when Humphreys was captured, the murder weapon that would be linked to the murders was recovered, and he had on him $800 in cash that he presumably obtained from the victim's stolen ATM and credit cards. For some reason, it would take 4 years for the case to go to trial. But in 2007, he was convicted, found guilty of 2 counts of malice murder, and he was sentenced to death.
Count 1, malice murder. We find the defendant, Stacey Ian Humphreys, guilty. As to count 2, malice murder, we, the jury, find the defendant, Stacey Ian Humphreys, guilty.
So even though the crime happened 22 years ago, he has officially been on death row 18 years. Something that is scheduled to come to an end this month on December 17th. Another execution in Florida. Serial killer Frank Walls is scheduled for the following day, on December 18th. A video on the case of Frank Walls will appear on this channel in a few days. Cynthia Elaine Williams, known affectionately to everyone as Cindy, was born in Louisiana in 1970, so she was only 33 years old. Cindy had been living in Georgia with her husband, Ted Williams, for only 5 years before her life was tragically taken. While giving an impact statement at trial, Cindy's husband, Ted, was in tears and crying as he spoke about his beloved wife, stating how he remains depressed since his wife's death. He said, "I catch myself during the day thinking, wait until Cindy hears about this. Or I hear about something and I imagine her laughing. All I want is to have her back, but that's never going to happen." Lori Kathleen Brown was born in Georgia in 1982. She was only 21 years old. A close friend of Lori, when interviewed, stated that Lori had gotten her real estate license immediately after graduating from high school, something that amazed her dear family and friends. They were all so proud of her. Lori was very successful as a real estate agent and began selling houses immediately after getting into that field. The friend also stated that Lori was very ambitious. She had an infectious personality and was always smiling. That Lori was very motivated and driven. Lori was very close to her mom and wanted to follow in her mom's footsteps because of how successful she was. Please go ahead and hit the subscribe button for more of these death row and upcoming execution stories so that you're alerted when the next one comes out. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more death row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. My name is Paco Rivera. Thank you for watching. Take care and bye for now.